Hello, my name is Eric Wally, and this is What's It Like? We've all heard about leaders who need to transform how they have defined themselves. Whether it's a bootstrapper now flush with private equity investment, a reactionary wanting to be a visionary, or as in Dennis Kelly's case here, facing the stark reality that the fundamental premise of his business might be flawed. Many of us have faced transformational moments like that, moments that challenge the very ways we operate, how we look at the world, or even how we see ourselves. This podcast serves to empathetically explore what it's like in the moment to face transformational leadership challenges. We want to know, what were the key realizations that were useful? How did the experience define that person as a leader? How did that experience affect their decision making going forward? Exploring these transformational experiences together will likely spark some useful insights that any business or marketing leader can adopt. Today's guest is Dennis Kelly. Dennis Kelly is today CEO of Postalytics. Welcome to the show, Dennis.
Thank you, Eric. Excited to be here.
Above all, we should say that Postalytics is a thriving concern, one that has grown quite a bit over the last several years. And Postalytics fills a really interesting niche in that it automates direct mail for a wide variety of verticals and sizes of companies, right, Dennis?
That's right. Yes, we have built a platform that enables marketers to build, integrate, and analyze direct mail marketing, physical mail, with a similar workflow to what they may be used to with email marketing.
That's right. And you've got an app in HubSpot and Salesforce, right?
That's right. Yes. So we've built a significant integration layer with HubSpot, Salesforce, Klaviyo, High Level, ActiveCampaign, Marketo, lots of others, and with the notion that direct mail ought to be sitting in the tech stack with email and with digital channels, and so our software enables that, and so that's been a key driver of our growth.
Excellent. Well, congratulations. But we're here today to talk about something that came before Postalytics, and that's BoingNet. So I see from your background, and we know each other a little bit, that you have got a BA in economics. You've got a really strong track record of being a CEO and a sales leader. Take us back to 2013, or maybe it was the year prior. What was the original concept of BoingNet? How did that come to you? And what made you think this is a business that I need to start?
Well, it was very interesting. I had actually sold another business in 2012 and took some time off. And then I reconnected with a technologist who I had done a couple of other startups with a few years earlier, and always held the guy in really high regard. And we realized that we're living near each other. And so we got together, and he was telling me about what he's doing. He had a consulting business. It was thriving. And he had this side gig that he had built out with some software. And it was in the direct mail space. And so, it's 2024 now. Let's go back 11 years. And, email marketing was exploding. Marketing automation was really starting to hit the growth trajectory. And nobody's really talking about direct mail. And so I thought it was a little bit different. And so he was showing me what he'd done. And the idea was, well, we can take some components of direct mail and actually measure the way that people respond online to direct mail.
Interesting.
And so I thought, wow, well, I would assume as we move forward that folks, when they respond to direct mail, will probably do that online. And so there were some easy to use tools that enabled each direct mailer to be tracked individually when somebody does go online, and had some landing page tools, and then we were sort of looking at it and thought, well, with some research discovered, well, despite the fact nobody's talking about direct mail, it's still this great big industry, spending about $40 billion a year in the US alone. And so if we could sell this tool into that direct mail ecosystem and enable those service providers that are doing a lot of direct mail to, offer this as a service, then we could get a lot of leverage and really help improve the overall utility of direct mail. And so that was the original premise, is that there needed to be some software injected into this process,
Right.
and that the folks that were conducting the majority of the mail campaigns would be the right place for us to enter the market.
And where did you envision entering the market? What was that initial go-to-market?
So what we had built was a tool that was designed to be relatively self-serve, that a reasonably proficient marketer with some chops to be able to do work in a marketing automation tool or any type of software ought to be able to build these landing pages and build this kind of process for these unique URLs to be inserted into the direct mail and these unique QR codes to be generated. And so we thought, well, we build a relatively straightforward user interface and a very clear value proposition. We can sell it to the print service providers who are conducting all of the real printing, and they're a key part of the whole direct mail ecosystem. They all are trying to move up the value chain, right? So they want to add more services that are beyond just printing. So we thought, great target. Direct mail agencies would be another great target. And then finally, the enterprise. And so we had some early traction with both some agencies, and Chrysler was an early customer. And so we thought we had some signals there, right, that would enable us to kind of scale that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So I can see the image that you're painting here. You're like, this is great. We got Chrysler, man. Here we go.
And BBDO was the agency that was
Wow.
that was in the deals, right? So it looked like we had something really strong there.
Yeah. And so in those early days, at what point are we in the timeline? Is this, a year in, a couple years in? What would you?
This is year one, right?
Okay.
So
And how
things
big
are, the initial premise is like, yeah, it's starting to come together.
and how big is your team at this point?
There are three of us.
Okay. Okay. And so then how do things progress? There's a lot of quick wins. Back in that time frame, if memory serves, 2012, 2013, the economy wasn't that great, but money was changing hands, but we were hardly in a boom time. So I can see how there must have been a lot of optimism amongst you and your team. What did you envision would happen next, and what did happen next?
Well, what I envisioned would happen is that I would start to press the advantage that it appeared that we had, and so I invested capital into this thing, quite a bit of capital, to build out the product roadmap, to start hiring a team, marketing, sales, client success, and start to at least frame out what could be a viable structure for this thing to begin to scale a little bit. And
how do you balance the mindset of this is my money that I'm investing with this is our budget, which are two different things. How did you reconcile, or did you not reconcile those two things?
Well, no, we certainly did have a budget, and the early startup budgeting is inexact science at its best, right? But we had some fundamental assumptions around leads that we could generate, percentage of leads that would turn into customers, the amount of time it would take to turn them into customers, the amount of time it would take for customers to ramp up and scale their usage of the product. And so there's some usage-based pricing in there that was built into the business model and the revenue stream. So, relatively thoughtful, I believe, process that we went through to build out a budget that, would be supported by some initial capital and then would, take the business to cash flow break even and then profitable status, within a year.
Okay. That was my next question. And did you have a board in any way, like advisors or anything?
We did have advisors, but we did not have a formal board of directors. So it was simply myself and my partner, the CTO, were the actual board.
Got it. And so then how did year two go?
So year two was a bit frustrating. We started to see, the metrics that we had factored into that original business model, such as the length of time required to close a deal, the length of time required to get a customer up and running. Those metrics were not anywhere near what we had projected. And so, it was taking longer to get customers, and then it was taking longer for customers to become active users, which would contribute to the revenue stream.
Right.
And so we thought, well, this is not nearly what we had expected, and nor what we saw in those early few customers that we had signed up. And so we must have some issues that we need to deal with.
And did you think those issues were like, oh, the wind is just changing, or did you think that the marketplace was formulating an actual decision about your offering?
We thought that perhaps we had not made the product as complete as it needed to be in order for customers to see that immediate value. And so we invested further. We expanded the product a little bit more. We added email marketing into the mix, right? So that as these campaigns are being built, emails can be sent out that are coordinating with the direct mail. We added a text messaging tool so that you could have a true omni-channel campaign that would be all driven off of this kind of core set of data. And then we also made some changes in the go-to-market team, right? And so we thought, maybe we have some of the wrong people that are out there pushing this and change the verticals focus a little bit. And so that was our year two sort of set of efforts to try to get this business performing with the KPIs that would be necessary for us to see that this thing could be a highly scalable, profitable venture with a significant growth rate like the rest of the marketing software world that was happening at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that space was absolutely exploding, and I almost can imagine you saying like, "Oh, if we could just get like 1/2%, we'll all be rich." That has been mentioned a lot, by everybody. So when so you're tinkering, you started out tinkering, and so you're tinkering, you're collecting revenue. It's not enough. When do the concerns start to build up that it might be something more than just the offering as you've described it? Because the way you've described it so far, it's sort of like, this is a no-brainer. Oh, they're not buying. Okay, it needs to be more fully integrated and be more of the thing. When did that become? What was it that made you say it might not be the product?
Well, to your point, and I don't think I've fully articulated this, everybody we spoke to who we were trying to sell to was essentially saying that, yeah, this is a no-brainer, right? Like,
right.
Why wouldn't we want better analytics about who's responding to direct mail? Why wouldn't we want to, add a, inexpensive, easy to use email trigger to a direct mail delivery? Why wouldn't we want to add text messaging options, right? Like, so everybody said, yes, you are right. This is where the industry is heading. But they just weren't moving. And so as we get into year three, we're thinking, okay, we've changed the product. We've changed the people. We've changed our website. We've changed our messaging. We've changed a lot of things. And kind of those core numbers of how long it took to close a sale and how long it took to get one up and running. And frankly, the amount of professional services required to get that to happen, like that just did not match the business that we had envisioned. and it was not like a marketing tech business. It was sort of like this pseudo services thing, right?
Uh,
And we really felt like we were missing that explosion that was happening in marketing tech. And so we had, you could foresee building a nice little business here, right, by cranking it down and having kind of a narrow vision. But that's just not what we wanted.
right, right. And just to punctuate your point about the era that we were living in, this is when Eloqua was really taking off. Marketo, HubSpot was getting its second wind. And everywhere you look, that's where the VC money was. That's where customers were talking about. This was the new era of digital marketing. Was that back end of the customer journey? So wow, a lot of sleepless nights and all the rest. How do you keep the team engaged when you yourself are starting to feel like, oh, this business is sort of wobbly?
Well, that's very challenging. I think that the messaging to employees about those core metrics, we were trying to be as transparent as possible around, like, these are the metrics you're trying to move, right? So this is not just a couple of us sitting in the ivory tower trying to think of how to do this. This is everybody contributing to it. And so I think everybody knew that that the path that we were on was not meeting expectations. And for anybody, it wasn't simply the two founders. It was really the core team that assembled there was, kind of aligned around this idea that we need to take direct mail and make it a part of this explosion in marketing tech.
Right.
And this is not getting it done.
And so what was that next chapter where you kind of had a heart-to-heart with yourself, maybe, or certainly your partner, and said, we have enough data here to where we have to start making some much bigger decisions? What led to that, and how did you navigate that?
Well, I think we were very fortunate during that first part of that third year. We had several inbound leads come in, and these were, say, larger SMBs, 75, 100 employees, that had direct mail, that were kind of a core part of their marketing, and they had invested in CRM and marketing automation as kind of a big investment in the previous year or so. And so folks were coming to us and saying, hey guys, you're living in this space sort of between, the physical and that digital marketing world. Like, we just invested in Salesforce. We do a ton of direct mail. Can you help us connect them? We just invested in HubSpot. We do all this email marketing. We'd love to augment that with direct mail. Can you help? So we heard this multiple times from a few different verticals. And then as we were struggling with the fundamental problems with the BoyNet business model, it became apparent to us that we were solving a problem, but we were selling to people that fundamentally were not really that interested in applying technology to solve their problems.
That's a very, very important statement that you just made, because from the outside, as it's you've got a broader view. You maybe see fires that the people inside don't necessarily see, or they see, but they've just gotten so used to that they're like, whatever, that's just the way things are. And as you were describing, BoyNet, I'm kind of imagining the marketing manager, director that's responsible for direct mail programs, engaging with your technology and clicking on things and dragging and drop things. But you seem to just allude to something that maybe that the marketplace you were targeting wasn't as technologically adept as you assumed they were. Is that?
Yeah, or as they said they wanted to be.
Right?
And so what people say and what they do are often two different things.
Yeah.
And so then as we started really thinking about it, we thought, well, if this market were so interested in adopting technology, it wouldn't be in the position that it was in, frankly, in the, mid 2015s, right? And working on ancient spreadsheet-based processes.
That's another really interesting insight. If I understand what you're saying, it's sort of like this is a fixable problem. If they wanted it fixed, they would have done something about it sooner. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying. That was a conclusion we came to, that that it was, we were trying to sell software to a market that fundamentally was not that interested in buying software.
Now, it's easy for me to ask this question here in 2024, but what kind of beta testing or customer studies had you done? What do you wish you had done differently when you're in that moment and having that sinking feeling like, oh crap, this thing isn't what we thought it was going to be at all?
Well, I think that those early signals that we had picked up with some rapid adoption by a number of different companies and of different size and different vertical focus, that they were false positives. And what we probably should have done is cast a little bit broader net and spend a little bit more time really testing the core go-to-market assumptions, rather than seeing those early wins and the revenue flowing in and saying, you know what, they're telling us it makes sense. We think it makes sense. We have early indicators, but not that many, right? Like 10.
But 10, but 2 of them are household brands. So it's not crazy to think that the BoingNet was going to be a success. Did you give yourself, when it came time to say, all right, we're going to have to shutter this thing or transition somehow, and I want to talk about that, but did you give yourself like a specific deadline, or had the problems just so built up that was your wake-up call? What was that final indicator light on the dashboard?
Well, the frustration level was high for sure. The capital contribution into the company, I had stopped, right? So there's going to be some changes one way or another.
Yeah.
And then when we started hearing from those customers that were reaching out, it kind of helped us think that, well, maybe we have cast this technology to the wrong buyer, and maybe it's that buyer themselves that needs to be disrupted here.
Go on. That's interesting.
And so we started reaching out much more to customers like those that we had received inbounds from, and said, what is your biggest challenge with integrating direct mail with your other marketing channels? And we heard very consistently, a few things. And the great thing was that these are people that have already shown that they want to buy marketing technology.
They're already doing it. They just want your little slot in the overall category.
Just plug in. That's all you need to do, is plug into what I already have, and we're good. And so it was really those conversations that helped us understand, okay, there's a bigger opportunity here than I think we had even originally imagined. Because, I mean, if you think about the number of businesses out there that have acquired, fundamental marketing technology,
right?
It's just about every business in America,
Pretty
right?
much. Right.
And so and then B, these are people who have already shown a proclivity to writing a check for software like this. So
you're not having to sell the whole category of technology and then your product within that category.
Right. Yes.
And, having invested as much as you did emotionally, financially, I can't imagine what those dinner conversations were like. Um, uh, you know, why didn't you double down, maybe do a PR campaign or, thought leadership to sell through? Why didn't you stay on the railroad tracks, as opposed to begin to think about what you need to do instead? And certainly you were gifted by those inbound leads, right?
Very
If
much.
if this had happened, 4 years earlier, and we're talking about 2010, and you arriving at this decision in 2014, I would imagine maybe those inbound leads wouldn't be there. So it was kismet in that way.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I think that, um, we had good fortune in getting those leads at that time because we were ready to do something different. Our frustration was high. We couldn't move the needle on some very fundamental things. And we tried different approaches and different people. And so we decided that essentially that business was going to be that business.
Right.
And there was not a lot more we could do with it. So, and that is not what we wanted. We wanted to, build something more substantial. And so that it was that thinking that got us to really dive into the underlying drivers of those inbound leads.
So what's really interesting about what you're saying, how you just described that, is you had a clear vision, but the vision wasn't necessarily dependent on the product specifics. It sounds like you wanted to create a business that would scale and capitalize on the MarTech boom. Is that a fair?
That is correct. That is
Okay.
correct.
And so then you started to get data and input, relatively quickly. This isn't, I'm not driving a Lambo yet. So what's going on?
Yeah, no, it was very Chevy Bolt at the time.
The Bolt. So then when do you have so how does it end? And you've got these nice little embers in the fire that you don't want to cool off. How do you maintain credibility with them?
Yeah. So we had, we had built up 50 or 60 customers that were all, paying customers using the BoyNet product. Right. And what we wanted to do was to use that cash flow to finance the creation of a new product. Fortunately, we were able to reuse a lot of the BoyNet code as sort of an underlying layer of what is today Postalytics. And so, because some of those fundamental problems that we solved with BoyNet were still there, right? And so we could carry that forward. We could carry forward the fact we'd built out, a subscription billing system through Stripe, and that we had built out an account management system and a way for agencies to have a kind of a account that could set up multiple clients underneath. And so there's a lot there that was reusable. And so we had to sort of crank down the go-to-market efforts for BoyNet while maintaining those customers and keeping them happy. And then really shift the development effort to build something new that would solve a bigger problem for a different audience.
Right. And at that point, you're probably starting to have some cautious optimism about the future. Is that right?
A lot of anxiety, for sure. But yes, the feeling was that if we can just get through this period of, living on that cash flow, and while we're racing to build this thing for launch at Inbound 2017.
Wow.
So an entire year of marketing budget into a booth at Inbound 17 with a hard date, right?
Right.
This has to be launched. And so it was a rallying point, and it, was a tremendous amount of work to sprint to get there.
Yeah, because you're trading a balancing act of unknowns in terms of anxiety to now we know what we need to do. You're probably still doubting a lot, but we have to marshal everything to get there. How much runway did you have between that decision and going to inbound?
Months.
Wow. And you're fixing the product and fixing the messaging and standing up a business basically in months. Now you've got a lot of data, you've got customers, but that's basically what you're doing. That's the task.
Yeah. We were building a new brand and building a new category of product. There was nothing like it. There was no such thing as direct mail automation at the time. We created a category, and so it was a lot. But as we dove into it, and we became more and more convinced that direct mail had to change fundamentally.
And you weren't going to change it.
And that BoyNet was not going to change it, but Postalytics would.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Because of the ways that you described.
That's right.
And so what happened at, the night before, did you sleep? What happened at inbound?
Well, we showed up to inbound, and we had a booth, and there was a big sign, like the one behind me, that said Postalytics direct mail automation. It was probably 15 feet in the air, so it was very high. And people would walk by the booth, and they sort of eyes are glazed, and they see it, and they thought, what is the word automation doing next to the phrase direct mail? And so people would stop just to ask, what are you guys doing? Like this does not make sense. It's incongruous, right?
At least you're answering questions. That's pretty awesome.
and I'll never forget, we had 200 leads come out of that conference. We had people that came back 4 or 5 times, bringing their team and saying, "Are you serious? Like, you're doing what?" And so it was such a high.
I can only imagine, but it must have
And
felt
relief.
yeah, right. After 4 years of crawling through glass, you get this incredible windfall of leads, enormous validation. How did you figure out pricing and all of that?
Well, we had done research on what pricing, kind of pricing that direct mail was typically getting, and then, what we thought that the market. At the end of the day, initial pricing is a guess, right? But we loaded out. We put pricing that kind of popped us up 10 or 15% over sort of what direct mail pricing looked like in a more traditional workflow that's being handled by spreadsheets and email and things like that.
And so, the startup mentality is very much about being scrappy, working with what you have, being opportunistic, taking advantage of what you're presented with. And at the same time, there's so many tools, much more now than there were, 7, 8 years ago, like surveys and other third-party research. You mentioned earlier about doing research. What were your research sources during all of this, and what was your mentality around that?
Well, the early research was around really just cold calls and talking to people that looked like those early inbound leads that we got, and that sort of gave us enough confidence to go write that big check to do the HubSpot conference. And frankly, that conference and all the conversations that you have at a conference was by far the best market research that we could have done.
Because you're really immersed in the world at that point at HubSpot Inbound. Everybody's there. I should say, everybody from all corners of the industry is there. And I just keep thinking of all of those people walking past your booth and stopping and looking back and go, wait, what do you guys do? That's
Exactly.
that is
Exactly.
that's a
And
career highlight, I bet.
well, and you know, I think it says something also that early on, when you're trying to establish something, don't be afraid to put words together that will jar people, right? That will get a reaction, and obviously a reaction that you're looking for. But you know, if you're trying to create a new category, if you're trying to change the paradigm, right, whatever cliche we want to use, you need to put something out there that is so fundamentally different than what they're accustomed to seeing that it causes them to stop and think for a moment.
Well, you had something that seems like it was both, because you had two things that they were familiar in seeing, but not seeing together.
Correct. That's right.
Whereas if you had done, something like big red grapefruit or something, I don't think you would have gotten 200 leads.
Probably not. No. But that was a great lesson, I think, for us, that in marketing, you need to stand out. And if you are just messaging in a way that looks and acts and feels like the vast majority of your competitors, you're not going to get it.
Especially if you're somebody new or somebody small.
Right.
Right.
If you are Microsoft, right, doesn't matter.
It really doesn't. They've got the budget. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so did the team from BoingNet transition into the team for Postalytics?
Not everyone.
Yeah.
No, we were not able to keep everyone through that transition, that 9 months of milking the BoingNet revenue stream while we built this new thing. We were not able to keep everyone.
But one of the things that I was struck by, something you said earlier, is essentially how transparent you were. So your team knew what they were getting into, knew the score, as it were, throughout the whole process.
Pretty much, yeah. I'd say, when layoffs are never easy, and people had invested everything they had into the collective success of the organization, and so, I will never look back on a day when I've laid people off as a day that I would think, well, they knew everything, so it shouldn't have been a surprise. I think no matter how well you try to manage that process, it is always very difficult for everyone involved.
That's extremely well put. So, it's 2018. Going into 2019, are you waiting for the sky to fall in? Are you waiting for this to be the end of your opportunity? What? Yeah,
we're trying to make it work on the back end.
right.
It was a great vision. The back end was a little bit more of a challenge. So really, 2018, 2019, significant learning curve on doing something fundamentally different and new. And so lots of, we got to throw that out, from a back end tech standpoint, right? And oh my goodness, we knew nothing about this. We have to build some software to deal with this. So it was a lot of really scaling our efforts around just making the software deliver on the brand promise that we had put out there.
Right.
And so it was a lot of work.
I bet. And so 2019 comes, you're hitting your stride, the numbers are hopefully looking good. And there's this little thing that happens in March of 2020 called the pandemic. How did that affect direct mail when people weren't in their offices? And you've done a wonderful job of growing in the last couple of years. How does direct mail fit in this hybrid world of ours today?
Well, at the time, I think we lost. So Postalytics had kind of a fundamentally different customer acquisition model. Is we really built it around this whole product-led growth strategy. So very much self-serve, find us, sign up, use the product without a lot of assistance. And so we had picked up, a few hundred customers by then. And March of 2020, probably March through May, I think we lost 30% of them.
Wow. In 60 days.
Yeah. And part of that was, as I mentioned, we had really hitched our wagon to HubSpot, and HubSpot's customer base at that time, the early days of HubSpot, it was very B2B.
Right.
There's a lot of B2B tech, right? A lot of software, a lot of tech. And so those companies were not in the office, right? And so they're selling to people who are not in the office. And so, they're saying we're out, right? But what people figured out pretty quickly was that, well, now people are home. And what are they doing when they're home? The highlight of their day may be their walk to the mailbox.
It's so funny. You're thinking back memories of memes, because that's exactly what I remember happening specifically in spring and summer of 2020 was messages just like that.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, within another 60 days, the B2C part of our business started really taking off. And so we were able to kind of transition from a primarily B2B customer base to primarily B2C customer base over the course of that year. And it's still now that way, right? Like we're probably 80-20 B2C companies versus B2B companies today.
And so how does that transition make you feel about the future? I'd imagine pretty positive, right? Because it's less ebb and flow.
Yeah, very much less ebb and flow. And we're very fortunate in that Postalytics has been adopted across an incredibly wide variety of vertical industries. And so, one of our early category leaders, one of our early verticals that really did a lot in Postalytics was around financing and loans, mortgages, car loans, things like that. Coming out of the pandemic, the Fed started cranking up interest rates, right? So those companies stopped a lot of their activity. But okay, well, we've got 13 other verticals that are using this. So the impact of any one vertical has been mitigated, either up or down, right? Because it's a very horizontal solution at this point.
Right. Yeah. Congratulations. I mean, that is a wonderful set of accomplishments. All right. So it's Groundhog Day. It's January 1, 2013. You wake up, you know everything you know now. What do you do differently from a decision-making standpoint?
I would have clearly challenged all of us by asking the fundamental question. Why is this industry so technology phobic? Why have they not done anything to solve these fundamental problems that they say they have?
Interesting. Elaborate a little bit more. Yeah, what do you mean?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, the proof is in what people do and not what they say.
Right.
And these target customers that we were trying to sell into had 20 or 30 years of opportunity to adopt software as their fundamental, workflow.
Right.
And they hadn't.
And so you've got a balance of wishful thinking and reality, and it's such a hard place to be, because in those early days of any entrepreneurial effort, or even any campaign, sometimes wishful thinking is all you got. So what do you think are those hard questions that you ask yourself and your team that kind of pop the balloon of hubris, so to speak?
Yeah, I now, whenever I speak with fellow entrepreneurs, my son is an entrepreneur. He's got his own startup. I really push on, not taking too much confidence from early indicators of sales success, and to remain highly skeptical, and try to poke holes in those early wins that you get. And market is more important at the end of the day than everything else. If you're selling into a market that is ready for your solution, sales are easy.
Gangbusters, right?
It's easy. It's shooting fish in a barrel. If you are selling into a market that is not ready to adopt what you have to sell, you may get some wins, but there's going to be a lot of other sort of long conversations, and 6 months later, ghosting of, the conversation, and, all these other indicators that you need to really pay attention to.
Right, right. Yeah, you said it there for sure. And the thing that's coming to mind as I reflect on our conversation is, what did you kind of think of yourself as the market when you first started, like extrapolating that, well, I see this as a no-brainer, they probably do too? Was that part of your logic?
Certainly, absolutely. But then you test that, right?
Yeah.
And you hear maybe what you want to hear, but we clearly heard it back, and I think if you assemble a very logical argument, people will acknowledge your logic.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're going to write a check.
Well, okay, so flipping this conversation on its head, Poignant doesn't happen. Can you have Postalytics without it?
We would not have nearly what we have today had we not built Poignant first as a product. And we would not have the clear understanding of the market that, we're still living in that market, right? We're now competing with those who we were selling to.
Yeah.
And so we feel like we have a really clear understanding of their weaknesses as competitors, because we were selling to them for several years.
Yeah, and in creating a category, you also kind of kick the hornet's nest, to your point about creating a lot of different competitors. So what would you say are one or two tips that you could impart to stay abreast of your various competitors and stay one or two steps ahead?
Yeah. So, in a new category like where we are, your competition is typically some sort of legacy process, and we have competitors, we have people that have built software like ours, but we're all such a small fraction of the overall direct mail market that, it's maybe 10% of the deals, right? So 90% of the deals are, I'm going to work with a local printer, and I'm going to run direct mail campaigns, each as a bespoke thing. And we're going to, hire a graphic designer and, buy some data, and we're going to manipulate spreadsheets, and we're going to have all this kind of manual process. And so, if you understand fundamentally the drivers behind the sales reps of your competitors, right? What are the things that they are being incentivized around? What is the average sales rep for one of your competitors? What is that profile? If you were to build an ideal customer profile of them, right? What would it look like? And then, tailor your overall messaging hierarchy to really drive against the weaknesses of that. And that's what we've really tried to do here, because the success of BoyNet was very dependent upon a sell-through for these print service providers. So the sales teams had to go out and sell that stuff.
Right.
And that's where it really didn't happen.
And you really transitioned your thinking now from a product first strategy. Product still's got to be there, it's got to do all the things, to getting so specific and laser focused around what's going to work against your sales competitors, but not the company, the individual salespeople and their approaches, which seems ingenious, frankly, because that is the first touch that any of us get to any kind of B2B service.
That's right. That's right. So if you can really understand those people, and if they can be profiled, which in our case they can very much be profiled, then you can position yourself as a disruptor, as something fundamentally different. And there's an old way and a new way. You showed the graphic earlier, right? Like that's sort of the message that we're trying to deliver to the market. Like, yeah, you can continue to do things the way they've been done since 1995, right? When email became popular, or you can join like the 21st century and let software drive things. It's your choice.
Right. As it does for every other thing.
Right. Right.
Wow. Well, Dennis, this is fabulous. Thank you so much for your time and for going through that amazing story and progression and surfacing all of those really great insights. I know I took away a lot from this. So I definitely want to thank you. I want to thank our audience for watching or listening this episode of What It's Like. We hope today's conversation sparked some curiosity and gave you some insights about your own leadership skills and decision making. Don't forget to share a link on What's It Like with your friends and colleagues. And of course, I'd love to hear any feedback, comments, or ideas. Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and stay on the lookout for the next episode of What's It Like.